nowhere is safe from sexism, but also I don't think anywhere is safe from bad behavior generally. And I have to say, when I read that article in the Sunday Times, I wasn't entirely surprised, specifically because it pertained to surgeons. And I've had very odd and unpleasant experiences with doctors personally, and I don't think that that kind of high-handed and inappropriate behavior is all that surprising. I mean, I know that the impulse is always to see this through the lens of feminism and MeToo, but I don't think this kind of harassment is restricted just to women. I don't think women are just the victims of it. In fact, one of the interesting things in that article was that it was, I think, 18% of the people, of the men who were asked, had also experienced sexual harassment by their superiors at work. And what your previous guest said about the hierarchical system, I think, is probably very much to blame in that regard. And so it's an interesting question, but I mean, it's really alarming that people who have such huge responsibility, literally life and death, in the workplace are behaving so badly.
Yeah, I mean, let's take it back to the Me Too movement. Of course, everyone's heard of it. It sort of tends to inspire various different reactions, most of them negative. Do you think that it's actually had a positive effect ever since that hashtag appeared and women felt they wanted to stand up and say on social media, you know, I've been through all this rubbish, and the sheer volume of women who went, well, yeah, that's just daily life, isn't it? It doesn't seem to be actually having much cut through. It seems more like a sort of, you know, just a trend, a handle, a hashtag, but it doesn't seem to be having any sort of pertinent effect. How can we finally get the change that we need?
Well, I think the problem with Me Too was that it became a media circus, and that's never that helpful. And I don't want to sound overly simplistic, but I think the only way to stop this is to deal with it on a very direct and interpersonal level. And I know it's very unfashionable to say this at the moment, and you know, I do agree that men and boys need to be taught to behave properly. But I think as a whole, they are. I don't think boys and men are given messages that it's okay to sexually harass and abuse in this day and age. I don't think that's really happening anymore. And I think a lot of the problem is that in this case specifically, this young woman was afraid or ashamed to say directly to her harasser, stop it, don't speak to me that way, don't act that way, that's inappropriate. And I think that's a terrible shame, because ultimately, you know, grand societal kind of pronouncements aren't really going to help. We have to stop this on an individual, one-on-one level.
And that surely, I mean, it's interesting, both you and Dr. Mecca have pointed out that the fact that in a hierarchy where the power balance is completely not in any sort of equilibrium, it's much harder to call out a superior who's abusing their position. But do you think that it takes more people, when they overhear inappropriate conversations, when they witness inappropriate activities, even if the person, the subject of that conversation, isn't, I think there just needs to be a little bit more reassurance that people can intervene, and that actually by not saying anything, saying, look, come on, you really shouldn't talk like that, or you really shouldn't think of her in that way, or him for that matter, that people are sort of complicit because they don't call other people out on these things, and thus it becomes normalized.
It does. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's normalized. I mean, the descriptions in that article were really, really extreme in terms of the harassing behavior. I would hate to think that that is normalized in any way. But I just think people need to be able to speak up directly and in the moment and on a whole variety of things. I think we have this sort of problem with shame and not wanting to stick your head above the parapet and being afraid to be standing alone on issues widely in society. And I find that to be odd because in theory, we're in a very kind of free place and a free time. And I mean, I don't know how you can, I mean, in a job like being as a surgeon at the NHS, you're dealing with such stressful situations, that life or death matters. Surely you can find the strength in the moment to say, even to a superior, don't ever speak to me like that again. And I think that we really need to kind of encourage women in general to have the spine and just the confidence to do that in the moment.
Yeah, Jenny, I couldn't agree more. Great advice there. And yeah, if you need a New Year's resolution still to make, then perhaps, dear audience member, you can make a resolution that if you see an appropriate behaviour or someone abusing their position of power, just tell them to stop. That was, of course, Jenny Holland, the writer. Now, I really want to know what you think. I'm sure I'm going to get a load of emails saying, oh, the MeToo movement, here we go again. But come on, there must be some people out there who think, wow, that is still a huge problem in society today. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews. And there's a poll up right now asking, has anything actually changed because of the MeToo movement? I bet I can guess what you're going to say. You're with GB News on TV and, of course, radio. Hello to all the audio listeners out there. After the break, we're talking the blame game. Why does it appear that everyone else is responsible for Boris Johnson's woes? First, it's time for a check-in on the weather forecast.
Hello again. Another fine winter's day for many of us. In fact, for much of the country, blue skies will prevail through the day before frost and fog return overnight. High pressure still dominating the weather across the UK, and it will be for some time. Weather fronts staying clear, generally speaking. And under that high pressure, plenty of sunshine actually for much of the country during the rest of the day. You can see that widespread sunshine across England, Wales, Northern Ireland, much of central and eastern Scotland as well. Just some cloudier skies there for the far north and west of Scotland, parts of northwest England, perhaps a few parts of the West Midlands. The cloud not really producing rain for the vast majority, and so it's going to be a dry and fine day with light winds and feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine, with temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Under clear skies, however, quite quickly temperatures will fall away as the sun goes down overnight, and as a result widespread fog will start to form, particularly across central and eastern parts of England as well as East Wales, where that fog will be dense in places and widely frosty. It will be -2, -3 Celsius in towns and cities, perhaps as low as -5 in some rural spots. Milder, though, for the far north as well as the west, and increasingly along the south coast we'll see cloud appear during Tuesday. That will help to lift the fog. I think the fog, though, will persist across parts of central and eastern England for some time before the more cloudy weather in the south and the west becomes extensive into the afternoon. Staying bright in the east, but rain starting to turn up across northern and western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Generally light and on and off during the daytime on Tuesday, but some heavier and more persistent rain moves south across Scotland overnight on Tuesday. Now, this is a weather front which will push south. It's not going to be a strong feature, but it will clear the way to more sunshine as we end the week and also colder conditions.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. The partygate spotlight has, of course, fallen on the Prime Minister's wife over the weekend. What a surprise. With Carrie Johnson variously making headlines for a lapse of judgment in hugging a friend at an engagement drinks and for having too much of an influence in too many areas of her husband's business, yet again. The beautiful and talented Carrie must be the one to blame for her husband, who happens to be the most powerful man in the country. And, well, you know, his major lapses of judgment are clearly her fault. Indeed, in a weekend column, the Prime Minister's biographer crudely paints Mrs. Johnson as oblivious to her husband's flaws, unlike his ex-wife Marina Wheeler, who the author elevates to the role of anchor, dispensing useful truths to Mr. Johnson, unlike anything a younger woman could possibly offer. She just can't win. She's either too powerful and painted as a Lady Macbeth, or not firm enough. The biographer Tom Bauer even appears to claim that asking the Prime Minister to change his own baby's nappies is seemingly beyond the pale. Meanwhile, we've also been reminded this weekend of the lazy, tropish smear that is Carrie's alleged nickname, Princess Nut-Nut. Is this a case of tired misogyny, painting the PM as a man without agency and letting him off the hook? Well, let's talk to the Liberal Democrat MP for Edinburgh West, Christine Jardine, and Joanne Nadler, an author and biographer, as well as a former Conservative spin doctor and political commentator. Christine, I'm going to start with you. I mean, it seems to me there's a certain type of expectation of what a Prime Minister's wife should be, and for the commentariat, Carrie doesn't fit it.
Oh, I think it's worse than that. I think it's just at the moment, those who would like to see Boris Johnson remain in his position are looking for any excuse they can. They're looking everywhere to distract and deflect attention. And now they've picked on his wife, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, so far you've had one person who's resigned over this, who was a woman who wasn't at the party. And now, you're turning on his wife. She is a private citizen. She is not responsible for the decisions made in Downing Street. And I just find the whole thing outrageous, distasteful and unacceptable.
Joanne, do you think it's indicative of sort of pretty dinosaurish views in the Conservative Party when it comes to women? I mean, look, I remember the way that Samantha Cameron was often portrayed, as if David Cameron had a liberal thought in his head. It must be his wife's fault. And Carrie's going through the same thing. And it seems to me that if you're attractive, if you're intelligent, if you're vibrant and a Prime Minister's husband, then there's something wrong with you. You're a danger to society.
Well, on this occasion, I don't quite see it in those terms, actually, Alex, because I think that Carrie Johnson has been very active in positioning herself as one half of a power couple that's leading the country. And she hasn't chosen to present herself as a private citizen. She hasn't taken the sort of private role that Norma Major or Philip May have done previously. And I think it's widely known that she has been very instrumental in advising her husband. Now, I completely agree with both of you that ultimately the buck stops with the Prime Minister and it's down to him whose advice he takes. But I don't think it's unreasonable when somebody has actually, if you like, crossed over from being just sort of the Prime Minister's spouse into taking a more active role politically and in terms of offering him advice. Plus the fact, quite frankly, that some of the decisions that she's not backed away from being associated with, such as the redecoration of Number 10, have huge political consequence. And people are rightly rather outraged by what appears to be a court being run at Number 10 and not a normal set of accountable structures.
Well, this is certainly what we're hearing reported in the press, but I can't think of any examples of something that Carrie's done publicly that separates her from other Prime Ministers' wives. She seems to sort of clap on the doorstep and turn up with him to, you know, G7 summits or whatnot. And she's got her own life and her own job, and she had a job before, but I don't see what she's doing differently to require that she's singled out as if she's a dangerous, influential, you know, Rasputin-type figure.
Mm.
Well, I think you've done Tom Bower's article something of a misservice, if I may say so, because it struck me as being actually a rather interesting psychological portrait of the Prime Minister and why he may be, if you like, susceptible to influences coming both from strong-minded advisors such as Dominic Cummings, who was sort of in the public eye, and other people around him in, as I say, this kind of court that he's constructed at Number 10. So I would actually suggest, you know, it's worth reading his article. I don't think it's necessarily as critical of Carrie Johnson as you indicate. I think it merely places her in what is a rather dysfunctional set of circumstances at Number 10, which of course ultimately is down to the Prime Minister. He is the one that's accountable for that. But I don't think we should patronise the women in his life either, where they do seem to be taking an active role. And just to answer your very specific point there about what has she actually done, well, certainly during the leadership election in which Boris Johnson came to prominence, she was actively involved in issuing her own sort of media information about how that was going. And I know that she tweeted or she released on Instagram some photos of the two of them together after there was a much reported loud row that they had. Now, she didn't leave that up to the Prime Minister's team. She took the decision to do that, as I understand it. That's what I've been told by people that were at the heart of that operation. So therefore, I think if she's going to take that active role, it's not unreasonable for her to be seen as part of the team here and more than just as his wife.
I mean, Christy, how do you react to that? Do you think that Joanne's got a point, or do you think there's a strange situation going on? I mean, one thing sticks in my head that we call Boris. Before that, it was Prime Minister David Cameron. During Theresa May's tenure in office, she kept being called Mrs. May by everybody, as if she's just a school dinner lady. Do you think there's a striking difference between the way we treat women in politics? And do you think Joanne's arguments relating to Carrie's influence have any merit?
I think actually that our attitude to women in politics is something which is still a problem in this country. I mean, a lot of women like Harriet Harman, Jo Swinson, Theresa May, you mentioned, have done a lot to advance the role of women, the cause of women, the respect for women in Parliament. But there is still this undercurrent that, as you say, Theresa May was always referred to as Mrs. May. And Boris is Boris, or the Prime Minister. And this turning now on Carrie and, you know, seeing her as responsible for it and trying to deflect the blame, I think, is part of that. And I think it shows us that still somewhere there is this attitude towards women which is unacceptable, which you wouldn't get about a man. I mean, I thought about this today and thought, you know, if we were, rewind the clock 4 years, anything which Theresa May did, would her husband have been held responsible for? No doubt that he would have been. And if you like, Dennis Thatcher was always seen as, you know, just staying out of things. And I doubt very much if he had any less influence on his partner than anybody else in politics or any other thing. And what struck me today was, if Boris were still a journalist and he were, say, the editor of The Telegraph, and the paper did something wrong or he made the wrong judgment as a journalist, would everybody blame his wife? Would everybody, you know, when my husband was group news editor of a newspaper group in Scotland, would everybody have blamed me if he made a mistake? It's ludicrous. The buck stops with Boris. The leader sets the tone. Whatever has gone on in Downing Street, he is responsible for it because he creates the culture. And, you know, you've talked about the court. And one of the parallels drawn is with Henry VIII. Well, I don't think anybody ever blamed any of Henry VIII's 6 wives for the way Henry VIII behaved, even in those days, because Boris is the
Joanne.
Prime Minister. He makes the decisions.
Joanne, Christine, thank you so much for joining me with this fascinating discussion. I'm sure we've probably ruffled a few feathers with it, which is what we like to do when we need to talk about. Well, now it's time for the section of the show where we doff our fascinators to the imagined matriarchy and go about building our very own womanifesto. Yep, that's right. All my guests get to nominate 3 policies they think would make the world a better place. And of course, as High Empress of the show, I decide if they make the cut. And they always do. Well, Dr. Emeka, you're in charge for today. You're leading the matriarchy. What are your policies?
So I have a couple of policies. I think when we think about the world as a whole, especially for me, I'm thinking about it from a health point of view. So my first policy is sanitary products. And I'm speaking as a man. Obviously, I don't use female sanitary products myself. However, when you look at the medicine, I feel like we should globally have access for free sanitary products for women menstruating of that kind of age. I think that when you look at it, especially in developing countries, a number of women don't have the access to the sanitary products they need. And when you don't have access, what do? You tend to do other things in terms of you tend to adapt. So we have had studies where we've seen women in India using sanitary products which are supposed to be disposable more than once or twice, or even sharing them just because of lack of resources. And when you have sanitary products that you're using more than once or twice, what this does is it increases the risk of infection. So we call it menstruation management. And a number of women who are reusing sanitary products can have infections such as bacterial vaginosis and thrush. And what this could lead to is STIs, which could lead to PID, pelvic inflammatory disease, and sepsis. And obviously, this can have an adverse reaction for women in pregnancy as well. So I think it's important that globally, not in just developed countries and developed healthcare systems, that all women have access to what they need in terms of tampons, pads, panty liners. I think that's quite a big topic.
Great. No, great initiative. I mean, I know outside supermarkets in Kenya, they always have like areas where you can donate sanitary products. So it's a great initiative. Fully support it. Tick.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, number 2.
So number 2 is, again, with women and health, and this comes into antenatal care. So myself, I was born in Nigeria, which is a developing country at the moment. And we look at the antenatal care for women in terms of reducing female mortality in pregnancy. And the WHO now recommends that you should be having at least 4 different checks in pregnancy from a healthcare professional. And this is just at least. In the UK, you're probably going to get 1 every 4 weeks until 28 weeks, and then you might be in hospital every 2 weeks. And then after 36 weeks of gestation, you might actually be in hospital every 1 week seeing a professional, whether a midwife or an obstetrician. Not everybody in the developing world gets this kind of antenatal care. And this is a shame because this is what contributes to an increased risk of maternal mortality. So we need to be checking the mother, the healthcare of the mother, especially mental health as well, screening for diseases such as diabetes, anemia, high blood pressure, because that way you can triage and know whether the pregnancy will be managed by a midwife or potentially even a specialist like an obstetrician. We need to be assessing the baby and looking for multiple pregnancy. Many of you might not know, but Lagos and Nigeria and the Yoruba culture, they have a very high prevalence of twins. Yeah, in a pregnancy. And this is something that needs to be identified early because this contributes into how the pregnancy essentially is going to be managed. And then you need to talk to the woman about maternal care and the birthing process. How do you want to birth your babies? What will be the birthing process? Because the culture does change depending on where you are.
It's true. I did huge research into this when I was a journalist in Ghana, and that was about 20 years ago now. So it seems that we need to expedite that policy
100%.
Somewhat. Okay, what's number 3?
And number 3 is a policy that pertains to more developed countries, actually, especially here in the UK and the US. I think this comes down to teaching in the classrooms. I think the implementation of teaching boys and girls social skills which can lead to reduction in domestic violence against women, I think that's really important. So in a number of schools here and in the US and developed countries, you have sexual education and social education, general studies. I think that at this age, especially when teenagers' minds could be molded and we can actually speak to adolescents about what society actually is, we should talk to them about domestic violence so we can actually teach our young boys in society just the implementations and the complications of what it means to abuse a woman. And that doesn't mean just physically, also mentally, emotionally, financially. How many women do you see who have been in relationships who they've wanted to leave their partner, but they haven't been able to because they feel they've been manipulated, either emotionally or financially or mentally. So it doesn't mean just putting your hands on somebody.
Yeah.
Obviously, this could potentially reduce instances that I see in A&E, such as girls coming in who have been spiked with roofies, Rohypnol, drugs, different injections. There are a number of things that it contributes to in terms of domestic violence. And then you look at female homicide. We've had the cases of women being scared to walk from A to B just because they're wondering who might be lurking around the corner. I think this is something we need to tell our young boys from an early age. This is wrong, and these are the steps we need to lead to.
Get it imprinted in their minds.
And also, at the same time, be teaching our young women, listen, if you feel you're in this situation...
You can leave.
This is what you should do. These are the numbers to call. If you're in a club and you feel your drinks been spiked, or you have a friend and you think this may have been happening, these are some of the medical signs and symptoms to look out for, and this is what you should do if you feel that. That way we can show it's wrong.
All good policies. You know, we could talk about it forever, but we've got to get to the news. But great policies there. You're more than welcome to stay in the locker room. You're with GB News on TV and, of course, DAB Radio. After the break, it's time for my guest to have his say. We'll hear what Dr. Emeka needs to talk about. I'll give you a clue. It involves Djokovic. First of all, it's time for a check-in on the news headlines.
Good afternoon. It is 2:36. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The body of a British woman who was reported missing in Saturday's tsunami in Tonga has been found. Angela Glover from Brighton died after an undersea volcano erupted near the Pacific nation. It sent large waves crashing across the shore. Well, her brother, Nick Alili, says she died trying to rescue her dogs. 2 teenagers have been arrested and held in Manchester as part of the investigations into the Texas synagogue attack. Malik Faisal Akram, a British man from Blackburn in Lancashire, was shot dead by FBI after holding people hostage in a 10-hour standoff on Saturday. The 4 hostages were held at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville. They were unharmed. Novak Djokovic has landed in Belgrade after his visa to play in the Australian Open was cancelled. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison hinted that if the circumstances were right, Djokovic could be spared Australia's 3-year ban and compete at next year's Open. The deported tennis star now faces the prospect of being denied entry to the French Open after a government official there confirmed the new vaccination pass will be mandatory for international athletes. Amazon has reversed its decision to stop accepting Visa credit cards on its website. Well, it was meant to take effect from the 19th of this month due to a dispute with Visa over payment fees. But in an email to customers, the online retailer said it was working closely with Visa on a potential solution. You are now up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Very shortly after a break, we'll be back to We Need to Talk About.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to We Need to Talk About. This is GB News and I'm Alex Phillips. It's time, of course, now for my esteemed guest to unburden himself and tell me what he needs to talk about today. So let's go back to Dr. Emeka Okorocha, NHS doctor in accident and emergency. Now, what is it about the Novak Djokovic case that's particularly piqued your interest?
You know what? This case interests me a lot because, one, I'm obviously pro-vaccine. I believe the vaccines have done so much good here in the UK in terms of the deaths they prevented and in terms of the infections they prevented. I know just how difficult life was in A&E last year when we weren't vaccinated and we had COVID. So I've encouraged everyone to get their vaccines if possible and their boosters, which I've done myself. However, on the other hand, I'm so pro-autonomy. I do believe that you should be able to make the decisions you want to about your body. And obviously, Mr. Djokovic has done that and he hasn't been vaccinated. But then you fall into this kind of area where, okay, you've made your decision what you want to do or not do with your body, but you have to be aware of the consequences that may result from this. And unfortunately, he wanted to play in the Australian Open. He wasn't vaccinated, which is part of the Australian policy for his visa, if I'm aware, to enter the country and to play. And unfortunately, he fought his case and they said, you don't have the relevant documentation to come into the country and play. You haven't been vaccinated, and unfortunately, you're going to be deported and now potentially banned for 3 years, which I think is a shame to the sport of tennis and to the tournament, the Open. We know that Novak Djokovic is one of the best tennis players in the world. Someone I admire, me not being able to hold a racket myself. I see him and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And I think the standard of tennis for the average watcher, obviously, you want to see the best players playing the best players, and I know he'll be sadly missed in the tournament. However, this brings up the point that many people should know, whether you're a sports person or not, you have to understand that the world is moving, and that different countries now will have different entry policies, and a lot of them will have to do with the vaccine, whether or not you've been vaccinated or can prove that you're not going to be a threat to the country's population. And now when you look on the internet and a lot of the people fighting for Novak, obviously I see their reasons, but these are a lot of the people who were arguing that maybe Britain should have closed their borders a little bit earlier, and maybe we wouldn't have been as affected from COVID as some of the other nations, such as maybe New Zealand, Australia, and Sweden.
It seems to me, because look, frankly, I agree with you entirely on agency and autonomy when it comes to one's body. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if I want to go to West Africa, I've got to get out a yellow fever certificate, yes, whether I like it or not. That's conditions of entry. And it seems to me that a lot of this comes down to an elite sports star thinking that he has impunity because of his status.
You're very, very correct. And I think that's why so many Australians in the PM are happy with the decision to show actually it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. These are the grounds you need to enter the country. These are the rules. And if our citizens have to abide by them, so do you. It doesn't matter your status. It doesn't matter your how wealthy you are, how important you are. These are the rules and everyone must abide by them. Obviously, I said it's a big loss for the sport and the Open, but at the end of the day, I think when it comes to the safety of one's community and one's country and their demographic and their people, that's way more important than anything to do with sport and entertainment. And that's what we've seen here with this decision.
Well, let's bring in now, who's a retired NHS surgeon, Dr. Tony Hinton. I mean, it's interesting, Tony, isn't it, that Novak Djokovic has sort of gone from being world-renowned tennis player to pin up for the anti-vaxxers. Where do you stand on this? Do you think, you know, that they should have given him an exemption, given that he was there to perform sport, that he's, you know, recovered from COVID? Or do you think, you know, fair's fair, law's law, and you're not above it?
Well, actually, if you followed the Australian court case, which I did, the government admitted that he filled in the forms actually as he was supposed to, and his visa was correct, and he wasn't deported because he was unvaccinated. His exemption stood. He was deported because the government decided he may foment anti-vax sentiment. So it was purely a political decision. Now, this is a chap that really, up until recently, I had no idea whether he was vaccinated or not, because to say he certainly wasn't putting himself forward in any way as anti-vax. And you mentioned about going to Africa and having your yellow fever injection. The difference with that is your yellow fever injection stops you catching and passing on yellow fever. The current COVID vaccine doesn't stop you catching COVID. It doesn't stop you passing it on. And in fact, what's going to finish off this pandemic is not the vaccine, which is well behind the variants now as they've changed. It's the Omicron variant that, if you like, I would see as our natural vaccine. So I think it's good news on COVID. There is today a petition being handed into Downing Street with 350,000 signatures against both COVID passports and COVID vaccine mandates. And these mandates, if they come in NHS, desire. And what I can't understand is how can all these staff that are unvaccinated, many of whom will already be immune, be perfectly safe to work in the NHS now, but all of a sudden on the 1st of April, they're not safe anymore?
Yeah, I'm going to bring Dr. Emeka back into this. It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you do look at vaccines, like comparing yellow fever vaccine to the COVID vaccine, it is a slightly different situation, isn't it? I mean, yellow fever is a very, very nasty disease that people of all ages can suffer from. It can be fatal. COVID, of course, can be fatal, but normally with those who have compromised immune system or are very elderly. Do you think that, therefore, there needs to be some scope here to say, you know, the COVID vaccine does need to be put on a slightly lower tier, and when it comes to mandating it, that's plain wrong? That's to you, Dr. Emeka, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
Coming back to you. Pay attention.
Sorry. I think where it comes to it now is the difficulty with this is because we're seeing so many variants, and we're seeing, obviously, COVID mutate a lot. So we're a little bit in a step behind because we're creating vaccines from what we see at the moment. So the science says, okay, this is the variant of COVID. This vaccine's been tested and trialed on these people who've shown this variant, and we can say it's this effective. As the vaccine, as the COVID mutates and as the new variants come in, it's hard to say just how effective the new vaccines are on this variant. What we can say is just because a new variant has come in and it might be the most dominant variant here in the UK or around the world doesn't mean that other variants don't exist, and it doesn't mean that the vaccine doesn't play a big part in still keeping people safe. I'm still one that think, yes, being vaccinated, doubly vaccinated, you still have that added protection. Like Dr. Hilton said, obviously the COVID vaccine doesn't stop you from getting COVID, nor does it completely prevent you from passing it on. However, it does reduce your risk of hospitalization, it does reduce your risk of symptoms, and thus it will reduce your risk of, 1, catching COVID, 2, then passing it on, not completely stopping it. So I think it's up to the different countries and the different bodies to make their own decisions on what they feel is safe for their patients and their co-workers. Myself working in the NHS, I know there are a number of my colleagues who I've worked with who I think are brilliant healthcare workers who unfortunately decided not to get vaccinated. And when it comes to April, they'll have a decision to make of whether or not they choose that their beliefs are stronger than what they choose for their occupation, or whether or not they're actually going to get vaccinated. And this is a very controversial issue that I actually spoke on in GBNews last week when a few doctors came forward and said, actually, well, we don't believe that the vaccine is strong enough or the evidence is strong enough to make sure that we go and get it. And they've weighed out their own risk-benefit and made their decision, which I feel everyone should. But I'm still one who does believe that in any case, regardless of the variant, we've seen that being doubly vaccinated and getting your booster jab will reduce your chance of getting ill and your chance of being symptomatic and spreading the coronavirus.
Yeah, thank you, both doctors there, Dr. Tony Hinton and Dr. Emeka Okorocha. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how vaccines have become a belief system as opposed to just science. You've been emailing us throughout the show today about the topics we've been discussing, including, of course, the MeToo movement. Elliot says on that, I think the movement has exposed a lot of wrongdoing that many of us were unaware of. Quite true. But it's also created a climate of mild paranoia in human interactions. Also, very true, Elliot. Well observed there. Jay says, I feel like now men run the risk of being accused of sexual impropriety just for smiling or making eye contact. Do you know what? Don't worry. That is fine. You can do that. I think most men know when they're crossing the line. Holly says, having watched a documentary about female surgeons, the few that do succeed say they have to fight for scheduled operations, admit they're up against self-professed alpha males. They also said that as women, possibly wanting children, they are disadvantaged by needing time off. How very true. I think in a lot of high-pressured work environments, women are still, to this day, forced to choose between having families and doing a job, as if birth was invented yesterday. Come on, 21st century, pull your socks up. You've also been emailing us, of course, about Carrie taking the rap for Boris's mistakes. Barry says, I'm very annoyed with the very many Tory MPs that keep saying Boris Johnson apologised for parties over the last few months. I don't feel like his apology was enough. Nigel says, Carrie is right to get the blame for undermining Boris's policies. I believe she knew what was going on with the parties and should have tried to stop him. Why should she have tried to stop him? The woman's been pregnant for the last 2 years. It's not like she was there popping the corks on the champagne and having her knees up, was it? Well, nowadays, it's hard to know what's offensive and what isn't. A joke that makes one person laugh out loud might send another to their safe space. Well, here on We Need to Talk About, we aim to find out. Do wolf whistles get your goat? Is holding the door open cringe? And do we really want to split the bill? Well, let's get the same, but let's get a man's perspective. It's time, of course, for the Daily Trigger Warning. Oh, my favourite part of the show. Come on, Dr. Emeka, what gets your goat? What needs to go in the dustbin of history?
Okay, so what gets my goat is probably something that gets a lot of people's goats. And this is racism and abuse online. Obviously, myself and a number of people my age are big users of social media. As we go forward, social media is only going to get bigger and bigger with the metaverse, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, you name it.
Yeah,
and the sad thing about social media is it's great in connecting people all over from the world in terms of news spread and just, just having fun and enjoying themselves. A lot of people see social media as a relaxing platform that they can escape to after work, look at a few memes and have some fun. Yeah.
Do they find it a relaxing platform?
Of course, 100%. Jump on social media, go on a meme page, send some memes to your friends, have a laugh, all good and well. However, it is a platform for what we call keyboard warriors to get behind the screen and say whatever they want, unfiltered, to whoever they want to across the world. And we saw a big issue with it last year when England, unfortunately, went out in penalties to Italy in the Euros, and then free players, ethnically black, were abused online. And this kind of filtered to a lot of the black minorities here in the UK, and myself even, for sticking up for them. And I think it's a case of we need to take accountability. So I think people who are able to create social media accounts nowadays need to be held accountable. There needs to be some sort of government information you need to give, so that if you and yourself and your account has been triggered for racism and online abuse, you have to face the consequences.
Back to you. Do you not also think there's a necessity that people who see these sorts of comments and do nothing are kind of almost complicit? If you saw someone abusing someone walking down the street, you might be tempted to go up and say, hey, you can't say that to that person. I mean, probably not in Britain. But I feel that people just sit there and allow the most rancid comments to sort of steam like a discarded piece of poo on your timeline and don't say anything. Is it not time we called other people out?
It's true, Alex, but this is online. You have to understand, not everyone's going to be your best mate online. Not everyone's going to be your friend. Not everyone's going to have, the social ethics to come in and jump in and help you in real life, let alone online. It needs to start with the people who actually feel that they have the authority and the plausible deniability to make these kind of comments. They need to sit there and think, actually, if I write this online and call someone an N-word, this, they're going to come find me, they're going to cancel my account, and I might be charged for this, for hate abuse online. Like, it's happened a lot, and a number of different sports people and celebrities have spoken out about it. It's happened to me personally, it's happened to my friends. And I think that the social media sites in themselves need to do more, because especially when it comes to COVID now and the vaccine, a number of the things you may type, especially when it comes to anti-vax or misinformation, social media has done a very good job in trying to filter out misinformation and cut it right at the source via trigger words of anti-vax and COVID and what you type, leading to a number of people obviously replacing some of the key digits in a sentence with, hashtags or stars or pound signs or numbers, etc.
Yeah.
Why can't this happen with derogatory racial terms? We all know what they are. We all know what a lot of them are. We've all experienced them. They should be filtered out right at the source. So immediately something like that gets posted, it's filtered out and it's flagged up, and the person who's responsible for it will eventually get their dues.
Do you know, frankly, I used to be all about regulating the internet and social media. I'd just ban it at this point. I think it's all evil. OK, what is your other trigger? You've got another one, haven't you?
Yeah, my other trigger, this is a bit more of a light-hearted one. Obviously, with summer going to come up and whatnot, and hopefully we're going to get past COVID, a number of us will be vaccinated and going out and enjoying the hot sun as we do in summer. The minute we get a little bit of sun, everyone's out there topless and wearing whatever. Like I'm okay. Like me, you know me. I like to dress well here and there. I try my best.
We don't mind that.
I try my best, and people will wear whatever. And one thing that's really gotten on my nerves and grind my gears is people going out to the beach with socks and sandals.
Socks and sandals, so British. What are you talking about? That's heritage.
Look at it.
Heritage, that's legacy fashion, that is.
Just looking at it right now gives me goosebumps. I don't know what it is about
ironically
it.
cool again, you know. I actually think it's...
Listen, Alex, there are a number of things that come back in fashion. That's not one of them. I don't want to see it.
I'll let you have it. You're a stylish man, so you get to call it. Well, that's all we got time for. But join me again for what we need to talk about tomorrow. Same place, same time, 2 o'clock. Coming up next, of course, it's the wonderful Darren McCaffrey with The Briefing. But first, it's time for the weather forecast. Bye-bye.
Hello again. Another fine winter's day for many of us. In fact, for much of the country, blue skies will prevail through the day before frost and fog return overnight. High pressure still dominating the weather across the UK, and it will be for some time. Weather fronts staying clear, generally speaking. And under that high pressure, plenty of sunshine actually for much of the country during the rest of the day. You can see that widespread sunshine across England, Wales, Northern Ireland, much of central and eastern Scotland as well. Just some cloudier skies there for the far north and west of Scotland, parts of northwest England, perhaps a few parts of the West Midlands. The cloud not really producing rain for the vast majority, and so it's going to be a dry and fine day with light winds and feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine, with temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Under clear skies, however, quite quickly temperatures will fall away as the sun goes down overnight, and as a result widespread fog will start to form, particularly across central and eastern parts of England as well as East Wales, where that fog will be dense in places and widely frosty. It will be -2, -3 Celsius in towns and cities, perhaps as low as -5 in some rural spots. Milder though for the far north as well